You don't need a holiday to show someone you care. 1-800-Flowers marches on all year round. Send clovers for St. Patrick's Day, red, white, and blue roses for Liberty Week, or maybe even some in replacement for a Hug a Newsman Day. Get 15% off your purchase when you go to the FBIApodcast.com webpage and click our 1-800-Flowers.com coupon link at the bottom of the page, or go to 1-800-Flowers.com and enter the code FBIAPodcast.
Shut up and sit down.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Football is America with Ron and Kyle. I'm Ron.
I'm Kyle. Hello.
And today we are joined by Larry Dyer, the host of the Chicago Bears Review podcast. We have him here today to discuss Bears with us. Thank you so much for joining, Larry, and I'm very excited to have you on the show.
My pleasure, guys.
The appropriate term Ron is looking for is man crush.
All right, real quick, give us some insight into the show. You've been doing it for quite a while now, I know. And what kind of got you started, and what were some of the challenges that you faced kind of getting everything up and running?
Well, it wasn't my first rodeo. This was, I think this is my third podcast that I produced. A friend of mine, Ryan Simmons, we did a show together for years called the Sports Talk Underground. It was a podcast that he and I did, and we had actually been doing it for over a year before we ever even got it online. So like that first year that we did the show, we were basically practicing. He and I went to Western Illinois University together. We were in broadcasting, and we were kind of doing the show as to kind of scratch an itch. It was just a general sports show, topics of the day, all that kind of stuff. And then when we stopped doing that show, I also needed a reason to scratch the itch, and in 2007, the Bears were about to defend their NFC championship that they, won in 2006 when they went to the Super Bowl 41, and decided that, what do I know better than most things? I know the Bears. So I found a free podcasting site and used some audio software to record the show and get it up and running.
As you said, you did some broadcasting studies in college and all that. Mm-hmm. We're very, very amateur. Is it then wrong of me to constantly berate my fans and insult them?
No. Yes. I don't think so. I mean, because it's one of those things where people were, because I get stuff like that all the time, and people talk to me about why I'm so heavy-handed with the Bears and things like that. It's like, well, I'm a fan, and they're pissing me off, so I got to say something. That's what the platform is for. I'm using this platform to say, this is what they're doing. I'm upset, and here's why. Anyone who wants to listen, feel free. Anyone who doesn't, just hit stop and watch and listen to something else.
Now, see, I am a big Colts fan, and so what I'm doing right now, and I'm sure Ron is aware, is I'm using what you said to justify my horrible behavior.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Larry. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, he went to college for this. He knows what he's doing better than us, and he essentially has now confirmed that I should continue to call for Tom Brady to get. I don't care that the NFL doesn't like it. Well, the NFL doesn't like it, but I'm going to keep doing it. And he's laughing, so he gets it. Satire. We're all adults here. Cancer-free. Exactly. Fight for the cure. Anyway, now let me change gears and be serious before Ron eliminates me from the call, because he will. What is your strongest memory as a Bears fan? What is the thing that just sticks out to you the most when you think of being a Bears fan?
Well, there's a couple, but the one, the most historic one would be that 6-year-old little Larry D was in attendance when Walter Payton broke Jim Brown's rushing record in 1984. It was in October of 84. It was at Soldier Field against the Saints, and I honestly don't remember the moment that it happened. I didn't remember the significance of it. It was actually about a year or two later, my dad and I were watching NFL films and reminded me that we were at that game, and realizing that he was right, because I remembered that Walter Payton scored one of his patented over-the-top touchdowns in that game against the Saints. And when they showed the highlight of him hovering over the pile, that's when I was like, oh my God, that's right. That I remember that game. We were there for that. And that was one of the stronger memories. And then, of course, how disappointed I was that my mother decided to take me and the rest of the kids away from my dad's Super Bowl party. So I had to watch the Bears beat the Patriots from the front desk of the bowling alley while, I wanted to be home watching the game, but Mom took the kids bowling to get us out of the house.
So how did you feel? And more importantly, since you were younger, and I'm sure you've talked about this with your dad, and how did he feel about Walter Payton not getting the opportunity to carry that touchdown in the Super Bowl then?
It really wasn't an issue. I think we all kind of felt like Ditka felt anyway at the time, was that he didn't really realize with all that was happening, the way that the Bears were just running away with the game, the way that the defense, which was the star of that team, did what they had been doing all year, which was completely decimate the Patriots. Who was scoring and why or how and whatnot, I guess really didn't get taken into account until afterwards. I mean, because it was like years later, you sit back and you realize, oh my God, Peyton did not score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. I can't believe that. I mean, I go back and I watch the game now, like when they air it on the NFL Network. Enberg and Merlin Olsen, who were calling the game, were fully aware that Peyton hadn't scored yet, and that maybe Ditka was trying to make an effort to get him into the end zone. But aside from that, I don't think people really knew, or in the moment, didn't care that Peyton hadn't scored.
Outstanding. And I always wonder kind of what other people's views on it. I know what my view is on it. Obviously, I was born in 84, well, that's not obvious, but I was born in 84, and that is, so I didn't obviously watch the game live or anything like that, but going back and watching it, and I know what my grandfather's opinion on was it, and he thinks it was a travesty, and of course, he was always had a very strong opinion when it came to the Bears. But let's talk 2014. Since we're done reminiscing here, let's get into last season and really break down what your perception of the season was. Was there anything that we could really take apart and say, I was happy about this, or this was a success in any way?
No, not at all. I mean, because just about where anything could go wrong, it did. The one thing that people were looking forward to was watching our offense be as awesome as it was in 2013, and it was the complete opposite, where they went from being dynamic and unpredictable. Our opponents saw us coming from a mile away, not to mention the fact that our offensive line that was healthy for all 16 games in 2013 was not healthy at all throughout 2014. I mean, from the fact that Jordan Mills missed all of training camp recovering from that foot injury, Kyle Long missed a chunk of training camp with that virus issue that he had. And the first time that we had all 5 of our starting guys together was in the first snap of the first game against Buffalo. And then halfway through the second quarter, we lose Garza and Slauson to ankle injuries. And from there, we didn't have our starting 5 together pretty much for the rest of the entire season. And everyone, including Kyle Long, took some time not playing last year, missing a game here, 2 games, 4 games. Slauson missed the most. I don't even know what the number came to, but he missed most of the season last year. So I mean, the defense, you couldn't imagine it being worse than it was in 2013. But they switched roles, whereas we knew how to defend the run. All of a sudden, we couldn't defend the pass, and it just seemed to be the same thing over and over again. And as you say, you listen to the show, you've heard me say a million times on the show, behind the linebackers in front of the safety over and over and over and over again. Because if I can see that from my couch, how the hell can they not see it on film every single week with Mel Tucker and the disaster of a defense that he put on the field? So there really wasn't anything that was worth, like, oh man, well, at least we had this in 2014. No, we didn't. Because I can't think of anything that I would look back on and think, well, at least we had that in 2014. No, I can't think of anything. So.
Yeah, and Kyle will attest to this, but I talked about that between the linebacker and safety and just past the corner spot all year long, especially when it came to people like Jordy Nelson and stuff like that. Like he tears that side of the field, that portion of the field up. I'm right there with you.
Because people, my theory, Larry, is that the only logical explanation for a guy like Jordy Nelson, he's off on his own. That's because people forget how fast he is because he's a honky. That's maybe not the most logical explanation, but it is the most amusing. Now, your answer definitely mirrors every Bears fan I have talked to, how much hope there was going into the season. I mean, even the Tampa Bay guy we talked to, there were a couple of things. And, most of the teams we've talked to who actually were worse off in the record than the Bears had one or two items. And the Bears, we got nothing. And I'm not disagreeing with that at all. There's not a lot of happiness. Obviously, this led to total cleaning of the house, top to bottom. I believe even some of the high-end executives were at least rearranged. So the impression I am getting as the outside looking in, this is definitely a good thing, especially, getting John Fox. That's the first head coach with coaching experience since George Halas or something. So how excited are you for this new regime change, head coaching staff, and front office?
Well, I'm psyched. I really am. I was, it's almost an embarrassment of riches that we've fallen into all of a sudden, because when we started our coaching search, when we let go of Trestman, when we let go of Emery, hiring John Fox wasn't an option at the time because he was still trying to coach the Broncos back to the Super Bowl, and if my prediction at the beginning of the season had come true, we wouldn't have a shot at John Fox, because I thought Denver was going to win the Super Bowl this year with what they did with DeMarcus Ware and all the improvements they made on defense and everything. I thought Denver was going to win it all this year. So having a guy like John Fox, I mean, even after 4 straight division titles and 12 plus win seasons and a defending AFC championship, for him to be able to be available to us was something that we weren't anticipating, and to be able to go out there and get him, I think, is fantastic. And then the cherry on top, of course, being able to bring Adam Gase along with us, and a guy like Vic Fangio as our new defensive coordinator. It kind of reminds me of our former wide receiver situation, where we used to have our wide receiving core was the laughingstock of the NFL. To win, Marshall and Jeffrey, had that year in 2013 being argued as being the best in the NFL. At the end of the 2014 season, our coaching staff was arguably one of the biggest jokes in the NFL, to now having Fox and Gase and Fangio being argued as like, man, the Bears might have one of the best coaching staffs in the league right now.
There's definitely some karmic balancing right there, going from how could you do this to how did you do that? That's really nice. As you said, getting John Fox is a win enough, but then Adam Gase, who a lot of teams wanted him to be a head coach, and he's definitely going to at least help that offense. That's a slam dunk any way you look at it.
Absolutely.
Now let's downshift and get a little introspective. We know the coaching staff and the front office, there's positives.
Yes.
But what about the concerns now? I mean, is it personnel? Is it Jay Cutler? Is it cap space? I'm guessing coaching isn't there, but perhaps a shift to a 3-4 defense. I mean, there's definitely a lot that has the potential to go wrong. So what is your concern for this team next year?
For me, it's still the defense. It's still the defense. And it's because we're making this shift, and because the Bears have been a 4-3 team since the dawn of time, that we don't necessarily have the best personnel for it. That the transition that we're looking to make, some of these guys, like Jared Allen, all of a sudden we're going to try to make him an outside linebacker, or at least that's what he would be in a 3-4. Who's never spent a day of his life in coverage? Would he be able to do that? Going out and signing, Willie Young and Lamar Houston might seem like bad ideas now that we're switching to a 3-4. We're most likely going to let Stephen Paya go because he doesn't fit into a 3-4 situation, even though he was arguably the best defensive lineman on the team last year. What about our linebacking core? Shea McClellan's going to go into his final year of his contract. Is this the defense that he was meant for all along? Because that's what he played in college. Is John Bostic going to be a good inside linebacker on the 3-4 now that he's not the man in the middle anymore and things like that. So, and not to mention the fact that our secondary is still a nightmare. So, will we bring back Peanut Tillman? Will Tim Jennings be able to go back to that guy that was, neck and neck with Richard Sherman for most interceptions in the NFL since 2012, and something? Will ever be able to figure out the freaking safety position? Will that ever happen in our lifetime? I don't know, but that's where the most question marks, the most concerns still are. And then throwing a scheme change in on top of it, that's where you're still kind of worried, because the offense, even with the subtraction of Brandon Marshall, we still have Jeffrey, we still have Forte. The offensive line is going to be back, knock on wood, healthy again in 2015. We still have Martellus Bennett. Marquise Wilson, still might be the guy that we want to have, go forward, not to mention, who we might be able to acquire in free agency here in the next 72 hours. So offense is far less of a problem than the defense will be. And, like I said, with the nightmare the defense has been the last 2 years, plus a scheme change, there's a lot more to worry about there than I believe on the offensive side of the ball, regardless of who our quarterback is, whether it's Cutler or somebody we bring in or draft or whatever.
Wow, you just went through about 6 questions I had for you. just so you know. You just killed through a bunch of them. Let's start real quick with the transition. You brought up Jared Allen. And one thing that we just actually got off the phone with Lester Wiltfong for SB Nation, the Windy City Gridiron, which is part of the SB Nation website. And one thing he brought up was, since Jared Allen's been with the Bears, he hasn't really been asked to drop into coverage really at all. I mean, right. Why would you as a defensive end? But when he was with the Vikings, and granted, this is a while ago, and he didn't do it so much towards his end of the run with the Vikings with the different schemes that were being played there. But, early in his career there, when he first got there, he did drop back into coverage, he said, about 25 times a year. So it's not something that I don't think he couldn't play, because if you watch Jared Allen, the way he plays, his athletic ability, he's tall, he does bat down a lot of passes, he does cover the running back very well. I would be concerned against really good tight ends with him in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. But hopefully that they would, adjust the lineup to account for that. I kind of parallel him with Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney, and how the Colts, when they did the transition, or when the Packers, they did the transition from the 4-3 to the 3-4, how they were able to do it so quickly and granted there was a struggle to do the transition for them, but they did it well very fast. And I was impressed with that. And I don't think that this transition is going to be as brutal as what you and I kind of perceive that it will be, mm-hmm. because I think we both have our reservations, and now with our expectations being extremely low as compared to what it has been over the last couple of years,
right.
We have a lot of issues there. I agree with you completely about the linebacker situation. Lance Briggs is gone, and also with Stephen Paya being out the door, he doesn't fit the scheme whatsoever. It's right. It's better off to let him roll. But the linebacker situation, who do we have that can play that middle? I don't know who we have that can play the middle right now. That's definitely something they're going to have to address in free agency or through the draft. But one big thing, Shea McClellan, and I wanted to get your opinion on this before I get into the safety thing. Shea McClellan, he is going to the last year. He's finally going to be playing in a scheme that he was successful in college.
Right.
Is this the year that they switch him to that edge rusher and kind of make him the player that he should have been this whole time? Do you think that they are doing the right thing by letting him stay one more year and prove that basically he has to prove that he's not a bust at this point? He has to be able to do great things this year. Do you think he can do that? Well,
he's over 3 so far. So he's had three years with the Bears so far. As a 4-3 defensive end, he did not work out. As a outside linebacker last year, it just seems like every time I see
so bad.
Yeah,
it was so bad.
As every time I see a highlight on TV of somebody playing against the Bears, you see Shea McClellan chasing him in the background. Like whatever's happening, Shea McClellan is behind it and running after it, as opposed to being there and making the play in these highlights. He was a 3-4 outside linebacker at Boise State in college. If the Bears hadn't taken him, I was hearing over and over again that Green Bay was going to pick him up to be the other Clay Matthews later on in the first round if the Bears hadn't hadn't decided to take him. So, I mean, as far as his experience or whatever, this is what made him successful. It's what made him a first-round pick coming out of Boise State. So you'd like to think that this is going to work out for him. He's got one more year to prove it. And because he's still on his rookie contract, he's only making $1 million, maybe $2 million. So it's not exactly like he's tearing up our cap space just to hold him onto the roster. So, and the other unfortunate thing is with the turnover that we're going to have on the roster overall, there's only so many people we can get rid of. So, McClellan's one of those people you're probably just going to hang on to him because if it doesn't work out, he's gone next year anyway.
Let's say he does come out and all of a sudden he is the Bears version of the next Clay Matthews, which is what he was intended to be when he came from Boise State.
Mm-hmm.
If he has the one good year in this new scheme, are you willing to change your mind? Because there's a few players when I listen to your show a lot, and there's just those few players that you're just like, ugh, why?
Yeah.
And Shea McClellan is one of those players. And are you willing to turn that around, or do you need 2 or 3 great years from him to spin that the other direction?
Well, it'd have to be a hell of a year. It really would be, just because he was not good as a 4-3 defensive end, and I think that was more of a mistake by the Bears than it was Shea McClellan, because we tried to make him into something that he wasn't. I mean, he was undersized for what we were trying to make him. 6'2", 250 pounds is not a defensive end in the NFL, or at least not these days, anyway. And then when we tried to switch him up to a linebacker to where he would always be in coverage and never be a pass rusher, that didn't really seem to work out just based on the results. He always seemed to be out of position, or, like I said about the highlights, he was always behind what was happening. It had already gone past him, in the highlights that I saw. So, obviously it didn't work out, but, this is what he did in college. This is how he made his name. This is how he became a first-round pick. So you just being an optimist for a moment, you'd have to think this is where he's best suited. So, he's being set up for success finally. But as far as bringing him back in 2016, I'd say it would have to be one hell of a season that he'd have for me to just come out and say, well, we got to re-sign Shea McClellan. I mean, that would be stupid for us not to do that, and of course, my prayers were answered earlier this week, or maybe it was yesterday actually, when it was decided that Chris Conte, who was the bane of my existence.
I was just about to ask you about that.
In 2013. Oh my God, this guy is not coming back to Chicago. So, good riddance to him. Best of luck to him. I hope he figures it out, but, I'm glad he won't be, damaging us anymore in the future.
I was just talking to Kyle about how you hate Chris Conte, and not as a
yeah, it shows up right fast.
Because I told him, I was like, well, you don't listen to the show, Kyle, like I do. And one thing, it seemed like every single game, just Chris Conte let this one get by him, and Chris Conte let that one get by him. And then I remember there's only a couple of times. There was one game where he had this last year that he had 2 picks, and one of them was this giant leaping 5-yard interception. And on the show, it's almost like you're at a loss for words. You're just like, well, I guess he intercepted the football. And
yeah,
I know that you feel the exact same way that I do. I could not understand his appeal, and lots of talk about them going after a free agent safety, whether it be Devin McCourty. But I also heard some really terrible options like Troy Polamalu. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
It doesn't make that. I mean, that's a terrible, terrible decision. And how do you see them addressing the safety problem? Is it going to be something they're going to do in the free agency, or is this a draft position where they just need to nail it in the draft and get a guy that is going to be the future there at that position, and that's it?
Well, I really hope that we do both. I hope that we sign somebody in free agency. Devin McCourty would be number 1 on the list there. Although there are a couple of guys not as big a name as McCourty that would also be. I mean, anything would be an upgrade, to be honest with you. What we had back there, that musical chairs of safety that we had this year, where instead of going after one big fish, Emory signed 15 guys nobody else wanted, including Adrian Wilson, who I don't even think played in the NFL last year after we cut him. So, when the mock draft started coming out right after the Super Bowl, it had the Bears taking Landon Collins in the first round, that safety out of Alabama. Of course, every other mock draft I have now has shifted towards the Bears either taking an outside linebacker / pass rusher or Danny Shelton, the nose tackle out of Washington. So, it looks like as far as the experts are concerned, we're going to address the front as opposed to addressing our secondary. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But, Troy Polamalu, you can't argue with what the guy's done. He's been in a 3-4 his whole career, but his body's been falling apart on him. So that's the last thing that we need is a team that, not only through poor play, but also through injuries has suffered through that. Why would you bring somebody in, no matter how productive he has been in his career? Why would you bring somebody in who's been, battling to stay on the field the last few years in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, Mike Brown, that one comes to mind pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of guys dealing with injury and the safety position, what about Charles Tillman? Now, he's definitely a big part of the Bears defense, but great stand-up guy, respected player, all that doesn't matter if you can't stay healthy. We've seen it quite a few times around the league. Corners get a little older, they switch to safety, and it can work out. Do you think that moving Charles Tillman to safety would, one, allow him to be more productive or effective or anything, and two, help him stay on the field and stay healthy?
I think it depends.
I mean, do you even think he has enough left in the tank to be effective at this point? That's another.
Well, it's tough because I think that Peanut was productive, even when he was injured. It was those, the fact that the ruptured tricep both times in 2013 and 2014, it was the season-ending injury that put him out. I think it depends on which of the safety positions we put, or we would want to use him as. The free safety being more of the coverage guy, and the strong safety being more of the run supporter. I think that with the way that he's kind of proven, quote unquote, fragile over the last couple of years, you wouldn't want to put him in at strong safety if he's going to be up there in run support, taking on offensive linemen and everything like that. Then no, I think that would be a huge mistake. I think maybe it's something worth exploring to move him to free safety, where he'd be spending more of his time in coverage and things like that. Then yeah, maybe definitely that would be a good idea. But I follow Peanut on Twitter, and people have asked him that before, and I think he would be against moving to safety, or at least the responses that I've seen, he has no interest in doing it.
And that's unfortunate, because I think that he could honestly be great there, and if he took a page from the Charles Woodson playbook, he could honestly extend his. I mean, look how old Charles Woodson is. He just signed another 1-year extension with the Raiders. I mean, this guy is going into like his 17th or 18th season or something like that.
He's about to become older than time itself.
And he's still playing. And Charles Tillman could honestly extend his career another 6 years by just becoming a safety. And I understand that, if you have no interest, you have no interest, and do what you love and not what you have to if you don't want to do it. But it's a bummer when you think about it, because I would love to see him play on the Bears for 20 years. I mean, that's a player that I have loved since the moment he stepped on the field in a Bears uniform.
Well, he is the one guy that I would like to see the Bears, bring back, for all these guys that are running out their contracts, like DJ Williams and Lance Briggs and Chris Conte, and so on. On that list, Peanut Tillman is the one guy that I would like to see the Bears bring back. I would like to see them, just on a 1-year deal, let him come back and see if he can go out, on his feet instead of being carried off the field on his shield. You know what I mean?
Right. Let's shift gears here real quick. Let's talk solely about the offense here, and more importantly, Jay Cutler, and how you felt about, the coaches, the former coaches and current players kind of slamming him, and what you think about the whole Aaron Cromer buyer's remorse thing that kind of came about last year, and what is your opinion on him as the player, him as the person, and him as the perceived person, I guess is a better way of putting it. And then, how is this going to work out for the Bears with him at quarterback? Is this going to be something that, if all goes well, we're going to see more of him for the next couple of years, or is this something where they're just going to bide their time and he is kind of already out the door and he knows it?
Well, it's one of those hotly contested things amongst all Bear fans. You talk to some people who are Cutler apologists and say that it's not his fault, and then you have the other people who want to find his house and burn it to the ground with him still inside of it. So, it really does depend on who you're talking to. I've talked to people who think Cutler is the spawn of Satan himself, and other people who think that the problem is anything but Jay Cutler. I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't despise Jay Cutler because I'm a realist, and I know that for better or for worse, because we are the Chicago Bears, he is the best quarterback we've probably ever had outside of Sid Luckman back in the freaking 40s. So, you can't argue with the guy's ability, what he can do when he's on. And unfortunately, Jay Cutler is one of those players that has to be in a perfect situation. And, speaking more of when you're on the field, the protection has to be there, and his mechanics have to be right. I mean, you've probably heard me talk a million times about how Jay Cutler loves throwing off his back foot. He doesn't like to step into throws. He likes to throw it from his hip, and things like that. And you wonder why the ball will sail on you or not end up where he wants it to.
Yeah, I don't think he has 2 feet. I've only ever seen him use one. So.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's one of those things. He has to kind of be in the right situation, because before he got hurt last year, Jay was having a heck of a season in 2013, not last year, but the year before, in 2013, before he got hurt. And then we saw what Josh McCown was able to do with that same offensive line, with the same cast of characters around him. And then when Jay came back, he wasn't bad at all and everything. He just wasn't as almost perfect as McCown was. But
how much do you attribute that to hype versus production?
The other thing is I probably would base it more on emotion than anything else, because we as Bear fans probably one of the more emotional bunches in the NFL. I mean, we rank way up there as far as that goes. But and with emotion comes overreaction as well. So because McCown only threw 1 interception in 7 games, but Cutler threw 12 or whatever it was in the other half of the games, obviously McCown was the much better quarterback, and we should have brought him back and so on. So I mean, like I said, there are two people. There are two sides to this, especially when it comes to Jay Cutler. Both are very emotional, one way or the other.
I think a large part of the reason that people can be a little more negative on Jay Cutler than is perhaps rational is that mega money contract he got. He got paid, and that's how the quarterback market is. But do you feel that the Bears were, in a sense, swindled at all by the Jay Cutler deal, or is that just what it is to get a quarterback?
I think the Bears swindled themselves on that one, because they went all in on Jay Cutler, and it's unfortunate that it worked out the way that they did. It was more of a symbolic gesture than anything else. It was a
which is not unique in the NFL.
It absolutely
with the
is not.
Position.
It is not, because then several other teams made the same gesture with Colin Kaepernick and Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco and so on, throwing a mountain of money at these quarterbacks. And these aren't guys that are, world beaters by any stretch of the imagination, even though Flacco does have a world championship under his belt. It was more so the organization saying that this is our guy. He is going to be our guy going forward. The smartest thing the Bears could have done last year was franchise Cutler. A 1-year deal. He still gets his top money, but we're not married to the guy. But instead, we're signing this contract that in this ass backwards way, somehow having the guy on the roster on the 3rd day of the NFL calendar guarantees money for next season. Because if Jay Cutler is still a Bear at the end of this week, we owe him $10 million for 2016. So I don't know who put this contract together. You can't blame Jay Cutler for taking the money that was offered to him. That's why I say the Bears swindled themselves.
And I would agree with you 100% with that viewpoint. As you mentioned, a few guys. One thing that really stuck out in my mind was during that Peyton Manning free agency, there was some talk with the 49ers, or at least expressed interest. Peyton, I know, wanted to go to the Texans, and as memory serves, both Alex Smith and Matt Schaub got new deals, essentially because they're like, oh, how could you possibly want to go for an all-time great when you've got me? And the teams kind of have to fold a little. That's what you got to do in the quarterback market. Now, as you said, the cap situation with Jay Cutler is not ideal. That's got to at least in some way contribute to him sticking around. But I'd say the bigger factor right now is the lack of available quarterback talent in free agency or even through trade. There's not really anybody else you could say this is a definite upgrade from Jay Cutler. Now, if you saw a guy out there in free agency or on the trading block who would be as good or better than Cutler, do you think that the Bears would be interested, cap be damned?
I don't know. I mean, because we've dug ourselves in such a big hole with Cutler's contract. Like I said, if he's still on the roster at the end of the week, because I think the first day of the NFL calendar is Tuesday on the 10th. If he's still on the roster by the end of the week, which is like, the 13th or so, then the Bears owe him $10 million for 2016. I don't know what genius put that or agreed to it, as far as the Bears are concerned. It's stupid. We're giving him money for something he hasn't done yet next year. So it's ridiculous. But there are a couple of guys I think would be interesting. Ryan Mallett is still out there. He's a free agent from the Texans. Brian Hoyer, who had a good year out in Cleveland before they started to fall apart. He's still out there. I mean, we don't need the big armed, the guy that can throw it 60 yards or anything like that. That's just what makes Jay dynamic, is that he can throw it out of the stadium, if he wants to. He can be incredibly accurate when his mechanics are on par. So, I mean, Jay physically is a good quarterback. It's just that mentally he makes some stupid mistakes and, he lets it get in the way sometimes, and he doesn't have the amnesia that quarterbacks need in order to be successful in the NFL.
On that same note, you just said, mentally is where his issues really lie. Yeah. And yesterday, I woke up and I was bombarded with the news that Brandon Marshall had been traded.
Yep.
Well, I believe it was
Friday, yeah.
But yes. So Friday, I see Brandon Marshall's been traded. I'm tweeting our contact with the Jets. He's going through. He's like, "Oh, we got him at a steal. I'm so happy. Instantly the best receiver we've had." I'm looking at it. I'm listening to Waddle and Sylvie, and I'm listening to all these different viewpoints on the trade. And there was a lot of report of, he was a cancer. He was a problem in the locker room. He didn't like where he was. His ties with Jay Cutler had been broken. Their relationship had fallen apart, and it was the New York TV show. It was the Inside the NFL thing that the coaches didn't like. And really what I had seen from all of my time listening to him talk on, the Monday and Tuesday morning show with Waddle and Sylvie, and, following him on Twitter and following him on Facebook and watching the things that he did for the community, for other people, and for the mental health awareness stuff that he did, it seemed like to me he was just a guy that liked to hold people accountable, and people didn't like that. A lot of people didn't like it, and he had a choice when they drafted Alshon Jeffrey to say, "Oh, they just drafted a guy that's just like me, and I don't want that. I'm going to be competing against a guy. Screw that guy." But he didn't do that. He took a teammate that is essentially him at a younger age under his wing and made him great.
Yep.
And now he's moving on, and it makes sense when you look at it from a Jay Cutler standpoint that one thing that Mark Trestman did was give Jay Cutler way too many options out there. That he let him audible too much. He let him just kind of have free reign over the offense. And one thing that Brandon Marshall was Jay Cutler's favorite improv tool. So what are you going to do if you want to eliminate the things that Jay Cutler can do on the field? You take away the one guy that has the ability to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And we were just recording earlier, and I said, it's like the two friends in the classroom that can't be quiet, that are best friends. And so you have to separate them so everybody else can get stuff done.
Larry, I got to jump in before you get to this. Ron, I just want to make you aware of what you just did, because I know you're not aware of what you just did. You said, "Hey, speaking of mental issues, Brandon Marshall." Good job. Good job, jackass. Very professional.
My fault. That is obviously not what I meant.
Because I'm like, where's the Jay Cutler connection? You can't do that.
I meant the fragile psyche of Jay Cutler on the football field when I talked about the mental
but your
issues.
literal
I know.
words were, speaking of mental deficiencies, bam.
I apologize. I know Brandon Marshall doesn't listen to
Holy
us and he couldn't care less. So
Usually I'm the one who's terrible. I am enjoying being not the horrible spawn of Satan right now. Larry, I'm sorry to derail that, but just normally I'm the evil one, and I needed to take advantage of that.
Well, it's the whole thing with Brandon Marshall. Number one, I am not a fan of the trade. I think it's a mistake. But at the same time, the point you were making there about taking away his favorite toy, basically, it's an excellent point. And honestly, I hadn't thought of it that way. But you're right. I mean, if you look back at 2012, their first year together in Chicago, Brandon Marshall had like 115, 120 catches. The second receiver on the roster had 47 or something like that, just to show you where the disconnect was. Now, granted, Matt Forte was in the middle with around 70 catches or something like that. But as far as wide receivers were concerned, Brandon Marshall was number one at 120. And I think Devin Hester was second at like 46 or 47. So obviously he was looking for Marshall more than he was looking for anyone else. And it's not just because Marshall was always open. So, taking him away, Bear fans for the most part aren't going to care about all that behind the scenes stuff. They're just going to see that the best wide receiver to ever wear a Bear uniform is no longer wearing a Bear uniform. And not only that, but we gave him away for a 5th round pick. That's how Bear fans are going to look at this. Marshall when he was on the field, he was awesome. And, he played hurt a lot this year, and then Barry Church caved in the back of his chest, and then we lost him for the remainder of the season. Then the offense really went downhill after that. We're just going to see that we suffer without Brandon Marshall, and now he's not going to be on the team at all, and that's really going to make some people upset.
The best year that Jay Cutler had, though, with the Bears was the year, believe it or not, the year that Mike Marks was the offensive coordinator, and they butted heads. And Mike Marks wasn't really liked by fans, or anything. I mean, he left Jay Cutler high and dry a lot. He was just getting pounded, and I think that's kind of the reason that Jay Cutler developed the attitude of, I don't care, I'm not going to go play for you. And everybody remembers that NFC Championship game. But his best year at quarterback with the Bears was that year. And it was a system that didn't allow him to improvise. You went here, the ball snaps, you go here with it. The ball snaps, you go here with it. The ball snaps, you hand it off. You don't have any options. And I think that that's the kind of guy that he needs to be. He's going to hate it. But if he wants to play quarterback in the NFL, he has to play to what is going to be his best strengths. And one of his best strengths is not making decisions.
Yes, and that's true. When Mike Martz was around, they fought a lot. I mean, and believe me, the networks did their best to expose that. Him yelling at Martz between plays and things like that. They always made sure that they caught that on camera whenever Jay Cutler was lashing out at Martz on the sidelines. And then they show a picture of Martz on the sidelines not caring. So knowing that this is what he could expect from Jay, that Jay wasn't going to like this, but that Jay had no choice but to do what he was told. So he did not give Jay Cutler the option to change a lot of plays, and we were far more successful, or he was anyway, when he was able to do that. So, I think that may be what Gase and John Fox and everything may have in mind for Cutler if he is going to be our guy, because here we are. They're almost 2 months on the job now, and they still have not committed to whether or not Jay Cutler's the guy, even though they've been giving numerous opportunities to do so. So whatever the Bears are going to do with Jay Cutler, they have not made known. Maybe they don't know yet what's going to happen. So we'll have to wait and see on the whole Jay Cutler saga. This all could be a moot conversation by the time the draft rolls around and we don't have Jay Cutler. We're looking for a new guy.
It's definitely a massive issue. Anytime you're not certain of the quarterback position, you've got to kind of reduce your expectations for the year. If you've got a quarterback, you figure at least the playoffs. If you're unsure of your quarterback, you don't know where the season will take you. Given the Jay Cutler situation, I mean, this next Bears year is so confusing to look ahead. Like, the coaching, it's up, but then Jay Cutler, I don't know. And then, we got rid of Brandon Marshall. There's a lot of ups and downs. So looking ahead, how much hope is there for this team for next year? I mean, if you had to give us a realistic top to bottom, best case scenario, worst case scenario, what do you see happening in this next season?
Well, the timing of this question isn't that great to be, because we haven't been through free agency yet. We haven't been through the draft yet. So we have no idea what players, Pace and Fox are going to add to the team to kind of shape it in their image, because so far we've been watching them.
You're shooting from the hip.
We're watching them subtract. So we know who isn't coming back. We know we're not going to have Briggs. We're most likely not going to have Paya. We've gotten rid of Brandon Marshall. We've done this. We've done that so far. Briscani's not coming back, thank God in heaven. But, just based on what our major, most obvious weakness last year was the coaching staff. There was no trust. There was no discipline. There was no chemistry, and that's gone. From the top down, from, the general manager, the guy that hired him, he's gone. The John Fox, who's a proven reputation, successful with 2 franchises, went to Super Bowls with both of them, known as a solid guy, a motivator of men. Just based on that alone, there's reason for optimism. The problems that plagued the Bears last season, even if you include Brandon Marshall in that, are not around to plague the Bears again this year. So we might suffer in some productivity, but the locker room is going to get right. And that's where you have to start more than anything. Because there are teams that are less talented, but they have better chemistry that produce better results on the field. And then the most talented team in our division last year, which was, in my opinion, the Bears, ended up in last place because we had no camaraderie, we had no discipline, we had no leadership. I mean, I knew from the beginning that we were doomed because Mark Trestman came up with the brilliant idea of having no captains, which basically says we have no leaders on this football team. Either that was his assessment, so he's going to pick random people to be in charge, or that, he thought it would be better to have a leaderless football team. And hey, we're all equal, and let's go out there and win it together, and everything. Trestman was just a failed experiment from the beginning, and John Fox is not.
I'll kind of give you what my thoughts are on it, and then kind of bounce off of that. If you had to pick, knowing what we know right now, and obviously there's a lot of speculation in this, is coming out of the gate, and we only get 7-8 wins max, but the team looks different. It plays better. It's going in the right direction. Are you okay with that? Only having obviously 7 or 8 wins and probably being 3rd or 4th in division, or are you saying no, with what we have and who's coaching and who's running this team and what the potential that we have, we should be winning 10 games?
I think it, like you said, it depends on how we look, more than anything. Because even if the Bears had finished 5-11, if we were competitive and we just weren't winning, that's one thing. But for us to go out there and we gave up 50 points 2 weeks in a row, we're getting laughed off of the field. And even those last 2 games that we won, against Minnesota and Tampa Bay, we still sucked in those games. We just happened to play somebody who sucked worse than us in those 2 football games. When we beat Minnesota, we beat Tampa Bay. I wasn't happy about either of those victories. I had a feeling walking away from those games like we hadn't won. That was the that pit of the stomach feeling that I had. Like, yeah, we won, but we should have won by way more. We played awful. We're lucky to have won those games. I had no optimism in 2014. I think that overall the product on the field is, not so much the wins and losses, but how we look. Are we competing? Because that's how we know if we're going in the right direction. If we go up against Green Bay and we lose 21-17, that sure is, that beats the hell out of 38-17 and 55-14 that we had this season. Obviously, we had no business sharing the field with the Packers this year, or getting blown away by Detroit in both of those games this year, and losing to Minnesota on the road to finish the year. God, we looked awful in that game. It was pathetic. We just looked sad, and it was hard. It was a long year doing the show in 2014, trying to sound like I'm not constantly bitching and moaning for 17 weeks in the season. As long as we're going out there and we're giving our opponent our best shot each and every week, you know, I think that would be a more positive thing than how it ends up in wins and losses. Because as our buddy Kyle knows, you're a Colts fan. You won 11 games 2 years ago somehow because you happen to play in the worst division in football. You get into the playoffs.
Mostly, yes.
You play.
That's mostly why they won as many games as they did this past year as well, and the year
but,
before that.
You know, you run into the playoffs, and that's where you run in, and you find out where the disconnect is between you and where you want to be. So that's wins and losses don't necessarily always tell the whole story.
This is very true. You start out by you have to beat the bad teams, and all right, like you said, Tampa Bay and Minnesota, you're able to do that, but if you can't beat the bad teams convincingly, it's a problem. And as you also said, it's one of the playoffs are difficult to gauge sometimes, but as you said, if you can win in the playoffs or if you lose in the playoffs, that's where you analyze what you need to do better for next year. And it's a great benchmark right there. Now, we're getting at the wind down point of this interview because I think you've given us way too much Bears information. If we talk more about Bears with Ron, it's going to bleed over into everything else I do for the rest of the week. I guarantee it. I know him.
He loves it. He loves it.
He sounds like a fan.
Okay. Well, I love it, but Ron, you forget how this works. You start talking Bears and then I remind you of last season and then you get all boo-hooey on me and it's really not, I don't want to be the guy that makes you depressed this week. Is what I'm getting at.
Thank you.
But, well, see, there you go. Going with he loves it, and I put you right back down. So this is life for you. So let's get to this last question. You already touched on it a little, but I'm trying to let's make this really, really direct. Good position in the draft. A lot of needs you could address. What is the pick you want, and what is the pick you think is actually going to happen in this first round?
Well, with the changes to the team, what we're actually going to do becomes more and more of a mystery. We got rid of Brandon Marshall. That all of a sudden opens us up to Amari Cooper or Kelvin Wright if they're available at number 7. If we get rid of Jay Cutler, it depends on it. Do we trade and get something in return for him or anything like that? Then would one of the quarterbacks be there at number 7? Do we reach for somebody? Do we trade back and pick somebody in late in the first round kind of thing? So as far as what the pick will actually be, that's more of a question mark than anything right now. Who I want is that beast in the middle, Danny Shelton from Washington, because he seems to just be the monster in the middle and the anchor of the defensive line. Because I'm an old offensive lineman myself from my old playing days and everything. I believe wholeheartedly it starts up front. And we got, in my opinion, the offensive line is fine. We just need those guys healthy. The defensive line was a disaster the last couple of years. And if we're switching to a 3-4, then the nose tackle, in my opinion, is the most important position. And having that kid on the roster, I think, will help us more than anything.
That seems to be the pretty popular choice there.
Yeah.
The Danny Shelton is who I constantly hear. So
all right, well then let's play, devil's advocate. What you're sitting on your couch watching the draft, and then all of a sudden, curveball, hey, Chicago Bears select. I'm assuming, just maybe he's available, maybe he's not. You hear them call out Marcus Mariota. What is your reaction at that moment?
Well, for starters, having the Bears throw Bear fans curveballs on draft day, that's just how they do business.
Well, that was the Lovie Smith way.
That was Jerry Angelo way. So you're absolutely right.
The Jerry Angelo way. Yes, you're right.
The one that sticks out for me, thinking, everybody going, oh, they got to take offensive linemen, and they read out Shea McClellan. It's like, there's not even a position of need right now.
Right.
He doesn't fit.
Well, on top of that, because that was the example I was going to use actually, was that I'm sitting here, the Bears are, I think it was 20th? That was our position that year. We got Riley Reef, an offensive lineman from Iowa. He's available. Chandler Jones, if we're going to go pass rusher from Syracuse, he's still available. We got this guy, we got this guy, we got that guy, and then we pick the guy that I've never heard of before, which is what the Bears specialize in, or what they used to specialize in anyway, was they find this guy off the street you've never heard of before, but all of a sudden he's our crown jewel of the draft for this year. And even though he turned out to be a stud for us, Kyle Long was the exact same thing. Kyle Long was the lesser known of all the names they could have picked in that spot. Just thank God he was actually a stud. That guy's going to be a horse for us for years. But
at least he was a player, the actual position of need, though. I mean, they at least went to fill a spot they had problems at.
Right. But to answer your question, if the name is Marcus Mariota, I would not be happy. You know, my draft review show would be a 20-minute tirade on why the hell we would do that after we, going and being basically banking on this kid who people have issues with, who's been in a spread offense then out there in Oregon, when that's not what we're going to be running here in Chicago or anything like that. I just feel like it would be a huge mistake for us to, when things are far more important than quarterback, in my opinion, especially on this football team, for us to, hinge this, the future on another quarterback, I think would be a mistake.
All right. Well, that's going to actually have to wrap us up here, Larry. We really appreciate you coming on and of course feeding into my fanaticism as well. And, and just throwing me for a loop. I didn't honestly think you'd ever say yes, but when you did, I was like, I called Kyle and said, I got this guy. He does the Chicago Bears review. I listen to his show every single week, and he's agreed to come on the show. And Kyle was like, and
Ron was super excited, but the thing is, it's hard to tell like appropriate levels of excitement with Ron, because this is a guy who, like, he'd come to work, and this is working at the Army mind, so not exactly soft feelings time. And he'd be like, "You guys, she let me hold her hand for 5 seconds." We're like, "I don't care. I don't care. You've been trying this for 3 months." So when he's like, "I got this guy," I'm like, "Is this good? Is he some guy? I don't know." Ron is very difficult to put into perspective. And I know when it comes to the Bears, he finds man crushes way too easy.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate that.
What, for being an accurate representation of your life when it comes to this team? Yeah. Man crush all the time.
All right. Well, Larry, we want to kind of turn the floor over to you. We're going to give you an opportunity to kind of plug it, your show and where they need to follow you at and how they access and everything. So,
all right. Well, I've it's the Chicago Bears Review. You can find it on iTunes. You either search my name, Larry Dyer, or Chicago Bears Review. It'll come right up for you. It's CBR Podcast at podbean.com is where the show is online. That's where you'd be able to find it there. I'm on Twitter at Chi Bears Review, CHI Bears Review on Twitter, and we also have a Facebook page. Just search Chicago Bears Review and join the group.
Outstanding. Thank you, Larry, so much for coming on, and we hope to maybe have you back maybe after the draft.
Absolutely.
Towards the summertime.
Yeah.
Great.
You can guarantee that if we do hear Mariota, I'm going to be calling you like, "Oh, I got to record his opinion. I got to record him before he gets furious drunk." I'm going to be so excited for that.
Little knee-jerk reaction to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll definitely want to put the explicit tag on that one if that happens.
Yeah. Well, Ron gets very creative with his expletive bleeps. My personal favorite are duck quacks.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, I love censoring. That's one of the things I spend the most time on doing with Kyle is censoring, because I love sound effects.
Well, and I am able to say some truly awful things that makes people question humanity. So, it is life. It is life for Ron.
Well, thank you, Larry. We appreciate it. And you have a great day, and go Bears.
My pleasure. Bear down.
All right, Ron, that was fun. Definitely understand why you have such a massive man crush on Larry. Fantastic man with his Chicago Bear Review podcast. I actually really enjoyed talking to him myself, because he was not only knowledgeable, but he had a good sense of humor. He was pretty good. How do you think that went for us?
Great. As good as I could have ever wanted it to. Obviously,
Yep, I can hear it in your voice. It's kind of sad, but that's good.
No, to have somebody on that and for anybody to be able to talk to somebody that you kind of look up to as a source of information, or somebody that you kind of look to as a celebrity. Like it's a to each his own kind of situation. I really like his show. I think that it's great, and I really enjoyed being able to talk to him after having only been listening to his show for about a year and a half. And a year and a half, I never would have thought a year and a half later I was going to be having this guy that I listen to constantly on my own show. That it's unimaginable.
I don't know if I'd use the term unimaginable. I mean, you're making it seem like, dear Penthouse, I never thought it would happen to me. No, it's not quite at that level, but it's definitely.
It is for me.
Well, I'm just more pointing out, just like I mentioned, your elevation of emotions is weird and confusing to me, because my emotions basically go between food and reproductive drive, being clean and editing, and sarcasm. And sarcasm is about 80% of where that focus goes. You might have picked up on that. So, yeah, but it was,
I really had a good time. I'm glad that he was able to come on, and I can't wait to have him on again. That's the big thing, is especially after the draft. There's one thing he does in a show called the knee-jerk reactions. After every quarter, he gets on and records a quick little knee-jerk reaction to how that quarter went. And I'm excited for him to do the knee-jerk reactions for the draft, especially if there is a curveball, like you said, because he is going to lose it. He might explode. Like, I think his head will actually explode.
I don't know if it will actually explode, but figuratively, yes. And that's why I'm going to be I am going to have Skype up and running and be looking forward to calling each and every one of these people like, gotta get him. He's going to go ahead and kill himself. I need to go ahead and be a hero. And it was definitely good fun for any of Larry's listeners still sticking around for some bizarro reason. We hope you can check us out. Ron obviously loves the Bears with a white hot intensity similar to that of a dying sun. And I'm a jackass. I don't know.
Well, we'll have him on again. It'll be great. And he seemed like he had a good time too, which was important as well.
I am glad for that. So that is, once again, Chicago Bear Review, Larry Dyer. Fantastic.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.